Hadoop 2.x configuration file. Now let's learn about the Hadoop configuration files. We go to configuration files. There is a series of XML files, but there are majorly 4 or 5 configuration files that you need to know. The first one is Hadoop env.sh, environment variables that are used in the script to run the Hadoop. Now open this file, Ctrl-Alt-T, terminal, log in as the root user. Go to Hadoop path, USR local Hadoop, etc Hadoop. Here all the configuration files exist in vim.tini, Hadoop env.sh. This command will open Hadoop env.sh file. Here is our Hadoop env.sh file opened. Now Hadoop runs on Java. So for the Hadoop to run as a user, you need to tell Hadoop where Java is. So in order to say Hadoop where Java is, we set Java for Hadoop in its Hadoop env.sh file. If you don't say where Java is, Hadoop will not run. Okay? That's first thing you need to remember while configuring your Hadoop. This is the path I have given in my Hadoop env.sh file. Now there are two things that we need to configure importantly for the client's talk to Hadoop file system. How does client use to talk to name node or job tracker or resource manager using what? Is it using name or using ID or using what? We saw these things in our previous sessions. How to client talk to Hadoop. Something called URL. Okay, remember? So we need to define the URL in the configuration file so that Hadoop knows this is the URL it is starting the name node with. So when any client can use the URL, it can try and entertain the request from the client for the DFS, which is the name node that is given in something called SDFS site.xml, client site.xml. There is file called core site.xml. Open this file, go to terminal, type vim.tini, core site.xml. Now my file is open and here are some property and name values. If you see here, XML file has property and the name. All the Hadoop's configuration are set of key value pair where the key and the value are given within something called property tag. If you don't give the property tag, Hadoop will not pick up the configuration value. And the first property here is Hadoop tmp.dir. This is the path of the directory that will store the temporary files. And the second property is fs.default.name. Fs is for file system. What's the default file system for the machine that is running the Hadoop presently? And then the value says URL. SDFS localhost 54310. This is the address that client will use to talk to Hadoop, especially the name node. Close it. And now the next file is SDFS site.xml. SDFS site.xml configuration settings for SDFS daemons, the name node, the data node, and the secondary name node. Open this file, type the command vim.tini hdfs site.xml. You can see here some properties and values. One that I highlighted in the screen, what does it mean? It is replication factor. Here it is set to 1. In the default, what is default value? The default value was 3. So if you have a real cluster and you want to set it 3, this is the file that you will use and this is the property you will change. And then there is one more property value. You see down. Property is dfs.datanode.data.directory. That says something called data directory. And then there is complete directory path given. SDFS is a file system, right? But the file system runs on Linux file system. This is here Linux machine. So some directory of Linux should have SDFS storage space. That path is the path that's given here. In the Linux system, in this directory, we will store our data. Now I have a question. Why do we need it? Why cannot it simply use Linux file system itself? Right? Why we need to have a separate file system called SDFS on top of Linux? Let's say we have a case. You have Linux machine, you have Mac machine, or you have Windows machine. This is data node 1, data node 2 and data node 3. They are in a cluster. If you don't have SDFS format, what happens? If you just store a file in this Linux, then if you store file in this Mac, and what are differences? What are the problem we will see? Same file can be stored in the Linux and the replica can be stored in the Mac. Replica can be stored in the Windows also, right? But what problems here? We have machines running. Heterogeneous system we have. What's problem if simply use heterogeneous system without having a common format? Because each one has its own mechanism of respective read and write. For example, Windows FAT32 file is not same as NTFS. You read a file from FAT32, you store it NTFS, then you read it. It's not going to work because the formats are not compatible, and we are talking about Hadoop being a distributed system framework, right? Not a single system framework. So in a distributed system, it's common that very many kind of systems operate. One can operate on Linux, or one can operate on Windows, one can operate on Mac. So when they all have predefined formats and when they all have different kind of mechanism to read and write, obviously they need to be something called a common format needs to be defined, which is SDFS. That's why Hadoop file system was formed. And this file system SDFS so reside in the native file system of the machine. If it is Linux machine, it will be on Linux. If it is Mac machine, it will be on Mac. If it Windows machine, it will be on Windows. So wherever they exist, you have to provide the path of the directory, path of that file system where it exists. So that path is provided in this configuration. And what is the configuration name? Data node, data directory. So let's get back to our node, get to Hadoop home directory, and let's go to the page where Hadoop has its configuration files. Now we saw core site.xml file. We saw SDFS site containing the replication value and the data directory. This configuration's SDFS part defined. Now configure the computing part. There is thing called map-read site.xml. If it's map-reduce, it's map-read site. If it's yarn, it's yarn site. So we just say it's yarn here, another file yarn site.xml. And if just say use map-reduce, only the map-read site.xml. So we don't need too much over configuration, but yes, in map site where you will get the address of a job tracker. And in yarn side, you will give the address of resource manager. Either you can use map-read site or yarn site, not both at the time. Two files also called the masters and slaves. These are the masters and slaves. Masters is list of machines that each run a secondary name node. And slaves, list of machines that each run a data node and node manager. You will configure it in such a manner so that whenever the master file is configured, that machine starts as a master. Whichever is not configured as master, start as a slave. Wherever the master's machine, list all the slaves. Okay, these are our configuration files. Thank you very much.